The sun had just begun to rise over the vast plains of the Serengeti, casting golden light over the dew-covered grass. A gentle morning breeze carried the scent of damp earth, whispering through the acacia trees where birds were beginning their morning songs. The savanna was waking up. But for one creature, the night had never ended. A young cheetah, barely past its first year, lay hidden in the tall grass, its breathing uneven. It had spent the last 2 days alone, separated from its mother and siblings during a wildebeest hunt gone wrong. The wound on its hind leg was deep, a cruel reminder of the hyenas that had attacked while its mother was away. It had managed to escape, but the cost was high. Injured, exhausted, and unable to hunt, it was slowly losing its battle against the wild. Not far away, a lone elephant calf wandered near a dried-up waterhole. Unlike the cheetah, this calf was not alone by accident, it had been left behind. The matriarch of its herd had deemed it too weak to keep up with the migration. A harsh but necessary decision in the unforgiving world of the Serengeti. The calf let out a soft trumpet, a call that would never be answered. Fate, however, had other plans. As the morning sun climbed higher, the paths of the two abandoned creatures crossed. The cheetah, too weak to run, simply lifted its head as the elephant calf approached. They locked eyes, one pair filled with fear, the other with loneliness. In the world of predators and prey, such an encounter should have ended quickly. Yet, there was no chase, no fight, only quiet understanding. The calf hesitated, then, with cautious steps, moved closer. It sensed no threat from the cheetah, only weakness. After a moment of uncertainty, the calf did something unexpected. It lay down beside the cheetah, offering the warmth of its massive body against the cold morning air. Neither of them knew it yet, but this unlikely bond would change their fates forever. The sun continued its slow ascent, spreading warmth over the Serengeti. The cheetah, exhausted beyond measure, barely moved. It was not accustomed to such close contact with another creature, especially not one as large as an elephant. Its body was tense at first, instinct warning it that it was in a vulnerable position. But the warmth of the calf, the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of its breathing, was oddly soothing. For the first time in days, the cheetah closed its eyes without fear. The elephant calf, though young, was perceptive in ways that defied logic. It had been abandoned, yes, but it had not yet lost the instinct to nurture, to protect. Though it had no herd, it would not let itself be alone. And now, as it curled its trunk around its own body, it seemed to accept the cheetah as an unlikely companion. When the sun reached its peak, the cheetah stirred, its hunger gnawed at its insides, and thirst burned in its throat. It tried to stand, but pain shot through its injured leg, forcing it back down with a pained grunt. The calf lifted its head, watching, sensing the distress. Water. It was the first need. The elephant calf had spent enough time with its herd to recognize the signs of thirst. It knew where water had once been, even if the dry season had taken most of it away. With a slow but determined movement, it stood up, its large feet pressing into the sun-baked ground. It nudged the cheetah gently, urging it to move, but when the spotted cat only groaned in pain, the calf made its decision: it would find water alone. The calf walked toward where it last remembered the herd drinking. It was not far, perhaps a mile or two, but alone. The journey was dangerous. Lions roamed these plains, always searching for weakness. Hyenas, too, could sense vulnerability. Yet, the calf walked on, its trunk raised slightly to smell the air, its ears flicking to listen for danger. The journey was not easy. A dried riverbed forced it to find another route. Vultures circled above, drawn by some distant carcass, their shadows moving across the cracked earth. The calf pressed forward, and finally, it found what it sought: a shallow pool, hidden beneath the shade of an acacia tree. It was not much, but it was enough. The calf dipped its trunk into the water, sucking in as much as it could hold, then turned back. Its return was slower, the weight of the water making it careful with each step. When it reached the cheetah, it carefully released the water from its trunk onto the cat's parched mouth. At first, the cheetah was too weak to respond, but when the water touched its tongue, instinct took over. It licked at the moisture, then weakly lifted its head, allowing the calf to pour more. It was not enough to fully quench its thirst, but it was a gift, a lifeline. As the day passed, the bond between them strengthened. The cheetah, though still injured, tried to stand once more. This time, it managed a few shaky steps. The elephant calf watched, then placed its side against the cheetah's body, offering support. Together, they moved, slowly, awkwardly, but together. The Serengeti was an unforgiving land. But now, neither of them faced it alone. The young elephant stood hesitantly beside the wounded leopard, its eyes filled with concern. It didn't know how to help its smaller friend. Its long trunk gently brushed against the leopard's spotted fur, feeling the weak but steady breathing. It remembered how its mother had led it across the vast grasslands, showing it where to find water, where to take shelter under thick canopies, and, most importantly, showing it the strange yet powerful creatures known as humans. The elephant made a decision. It had to find humans. Without hesitation, it raised its trunk, letting out a low rumble as if reassuring the leopard, and then began to move. It recalled seeing a group of humans near the big river far away. Surely, they were still there. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the dry grass. The elephant quickened its pace. But the jungle was not an easy place to navigate. Thorny bushes scratched at its legs, and twisted roots jutted from the ground as if trying to trip it. It had to be careful, but all it could think about was bringing help back to the leopard. It passed a herd of antelopes drinking by a small stream. They lifted their heads, startled, before darting away. The elephant didn't care. It moved past an ancient baobab tree, where birds usually gathered to sing. Today, however, they were eerily silent. Only the sound of its heavy footsteps echoed through the dry earth. After traveling for what felt like an eternity, exhaustion began to creep into its limbs. But it couldn't stop. The leopard was waiting, and every second counted. Then suddenly, a sound, unfamiliar but unmistakable. Human voices. Its heart pounded, swinging its trunk. It tried to pinpoint the direction. Yes, up ahead. It pushed through a dense thicket of bushes and finally saw them. A group of people in green uniforms and wide-brimmed hats stood near a rugged vehicle. One of them was crouched down, examining tracks on the ground. The young elephant let out a deep, echoing trumpet. The people immediately turned, their eyes widening in surprise. A baby elephant was running toward them. But oddly, it didn't seem lost or frightened. It had purpose. Saifo, the most experienced ranger among them, narrowed his eyes. He had seen orphaned elephants before. But this one wasn't behaving like a lost calf. It had urgency. Look at that, one of his colleagues murmured. It keeps turning back, like it wants us to follow. Saifo stepped forward cautiously. What's wrong, little one? He asked softly, though he knew the elephant wouldn't respond. But it had its own way of communicating. The calf swung its trunk toward the direction it had come from. It let out another call, then took a few steps backward, clearly urging them to follow. Saifo's mind raced. This wasn't normal behavior. We're going after it, he decided. The team quickly climbed into their vehicle. The elephant turned and ran back toward the jungle. And the rangers followed, their tires kicking up dust as they sped after it. It had succeeded in finding the humans. But would they reach the leopard in time? The young elephant moved with determination, weaving through the dense jungle, its ears flapping as it charged ahead. The rangers followed in their rugged vehicle, their eyes locked on the frantic calf. Saifo gripped the steering wheel tightly. His years in the wild had taught him that when an animal behaved unusually, it was never without reason. This calf was guiding them. But to what? Keep an eye out, he told his team. Something is wrong. The truck bounced over uneven terrain, tires skidding slightly as it navigated the winding dirt path. Dust rose behind them, swirling into the golden light of the afternoon sun. The elephant let out another deep call and turned sharply off the path. It barreled through a thick barrier of bushes, its powerful frame easily pushing through. Hold on, Saifo shouted as he spun the wheel, following the calf off-road. The vehicle lurched as it hit a hidden route, sending a jolt through the passengers. What could it be leading us to? One ranger asked, gripping the dashboard. I don't know, Saifo admitted, but we have to find out. The jungle thickened, branches clawing at the vehicle. But they pressed forward. Then, through the foliage, they saw it, a clearing, bathed in dappled sunlight, where a spotted figure lay motionless on the ground. A leopard, someone exclaimed. The elephant reached the injured cat first, its trunk moving anxiously over the leopard's body. The great cat barely responded, only managing a feeble twitch of its tail. Sifo leapt from the vehicle, his team following close behind. He took cautious steps forward, his trained eyes scanning the scene. The leopard's ribs rose and fell in shallow breaths. Dried blood crusted the wound on its side, and flies buzzed around it. "Oh no," one of the rangers whispered. "It's in bad shape." The young elephant let out a distressed rumble. Circling the scene, Sifo crouched beside the leopard, carefully avoiding its claws. Even in this weakened state, a wild predator could lash out in pain. "She's alive," he murmured, "but not for long if we don't act fast." His mind raced. Transporting a full-grown leopard wasn't easy. The wound looked severe, and without immediate care, the infection could spread. "We need to sedate her," he said. One of the rangers hurried back to the vehicle, grabbing a tranquilizer dart and a rifle. Sifo turned to the young elephant. "You did good," he said softly. "You brought us here." The calf watched intently, as if understanding. The ranger prepared the dart, aimed carefully, and fired. The leopard flinched as the dart pricked its skin but was too weak to resist. Within moments, its breathing slowed further, its body relaxing. "All right," Sifo said, standing up, "let's get her on the truck." Two rangers pulled a thick canvas stretcher from the vehicle. Working quickly but gently, they lifted the unconscious leopard onto it. The elephant let out a worried cry. Stepping closer, "We're going to help her," Sifo reassured. With effort, they hoisted the leopard into the back of the truck. "Back to the station, now," Sifo ordered, jumping into the driver's seat. The young elephant hesitated as the truck roared to life. It took a few uncertain steps forward, watching as its friend disappeared into the vehicle. Then, as if making up its mind, it started running after them. The jungle blurred past as the truck sped along the rough dirt road. Bouncing over every bump and rut, dust billowed behind them, and the scent of earth and foliage mixed with the faint metallic tang of blood from the injured leopard. The young elephant was running alongside them, its legs moving in long, determined strides. Despite the uneven terrain, it kept up, its trunk raised slightly as if trying to sense its wounded friend. Sifo glanced at the elephant through the side mirror. "It won't leave her," he murmured. A ranger in the passenger seat nodded. "They must have a bond. But can it keep running like this all the way to the station?" Sifo wasn't sure. They were still several miles from the nearest medical facility. And though elephants were strong, this calf had already been through a lot. "We'll slow down if it struggles," he said, "but we need to get to the vet as fast as possible." Behind them, the leopard lay motionless, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The tranquilizer had done its job, but its life was still hanging by a thread. The minutes dragged on as they drove, the vehicle rattling over the rugged path. Then, as they rounded a bend, Sifo spotted something that made his stomach tighten. A fallen tree blocked the road ahead. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before coming to a stop just a few feet from the massive trunk. The young elephant caught up, stopping beside them, its ears flaring wide in distress. "What now?" a ranger asked. Sifo jumped out, surveying the scene. The tree was massive, its thick branches sprawled across the road like giant fingers. There was no easy way around it. The underbrush on either side was dense, filled with thorny shrubs and uneven ground. He turned back to the elephant, an idea forming in his mind. "Hey, big guy," he said gently, approaching the calf. "Think you can help us out?" The elephant flapped its ears and let out a soft rumble. Sifo gestured toward the tree. "Come on, we need to move it." The calf hesitated, then stepped forward, reaching out its trunk to touch the rough bark. It pushed, but the tree barely budged. "We need more power," one of the rangers said. Then, as if understanding, the elephant raised its trunk and let out a loud call that echoed through the jungle. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, rustling, from the dense forest, heavy footsteps approached. Another elephant appeared, then another. 3 large adults emerged from the trees, their eyes scanning the scene before focusing on the calf. It called its herd, a ranger whispered in awe. The calf rumbled softly, stepping toward them. The largest of the adults, an enormous female, touched its head with her trunk in what seemed like reassurance. Then, without hesitation, she turned toward the fallen tree. The other elephants followed, Sifo and his team stepped back as the mighty creatures positioned themselves around the trunk. Then, with synchronized effort, they pushed. The ground trembled as the tree shifted. The deep groan of wood filled the air as the massive trunk rolled aside, clearing the road. Cheers erupted from the rangers. "Incredible," one of them breathed. The young elephant turned to Sifo, its ears flapping excitedly. "Thank you," Sifo said sincerely. "All of you." With the road cleared, they hurried back into the truck. The elephant stepped aside, watching as the vehicle roared back to life. As they pulled away, the young elephant let out one last cry before turning back into the jungle with its herd. Sifo exhaled, gripping the wheel. "All right," he said, "let's save that leopard." The truck roared forward, its tires kicking up dust as Sifo pushed the accelerator to the limit. The jungle blurred past, the fading sunlight casting eerie shadows along the road. Inside the vehicle, the injured leopard remained motionless, its breath shallow, its life hanging by a thread. Sifo's mind raced. Time was their greatest enemy now. He had seen enough wounded animals to know that if they didn't reach the station soon, the leopard wouldn't survive. The ranger beside him checked the IV line attached to the leopard. "Its pulse is weak," he said grimly. "We have to hurry." "I know," Sifo muttered, gripping the wheel. They had left the herd of elephants behind, the young calf making its choice to stay with its family. It was the right decision, but Sifo couldn't shake the feeling of loss. The little elephant had been with them through so much. But now, all that mattered was getting the leopard to safety. The road twisted sharply, and as they rounded a bend, something caught Sifo's eye in the rearview mirror. A dark figure, running, his breath caught. It was the young elephant. Against all logic, the calf had broken away from its herd and was chasing after them. Its small yet powerful legs pounding against the dirt road. Its trunk swung wildly, its ears flapping as it trumpeted, a determined, desperate call. "What the?" the ranger exclaimed, turning in his seat. Sifo's heart clenched. "It followed us." The calf was struggling to keep up. But it didn't stop. It had made its choice. It wasn't going to let them go without a fight. But why? Then, ahead of them, trouble appeared. A blockade. 3 large fallen logs stretched across the dirt road, forming an impassable barrier. There was no way around it. The thick jungle closed in on both sides. Sifo slammed the brakes, tires screeching. The truck skidded to a halt, dust clouding the air. "Damn it," the ranger cursed. Sifo's stomach twisted. This wasn't natural. The logs were deliberately placed. Poachers. He barely had time to process the thought when movement flickered in the trees. Shadows shifted. Men stepped out of the jungle, rifles in hand. 4 of them. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, smirked as he approached the truck. Well, he drawled. "Looks like you've got something that doesn't belong to you." His eyes flickered to the leopard in the back. "That's our prize." Sifo's jaw clenched. "You're poachers." The man grinned. "That's a harsh word. Let's just say we're businessmen." He took a step closer, resting a hand on his rifle. "Now, why don't you boys step out nice and slow?" The ranger's hand inched toward his radio. But another poacher raised his gun. Don't make me nervous, mate." Sifo's pulse pounded. They were trapped. The leopard, barely clinging to life, had become a prize in a deadly game. And then, behind them, a deep, thundering sound erupted. A trumpet. A war cry. The young elephant charged. It wasn't just running, it was an unstoppable force. The poachers barely had time to turn before the calf barreled forward. Eyes blazing, trunk raised high, it smashed into the nearest man, sending him sprawling. Panic erupted. The poachers scrambled, their carefully planned ambush dissolving in an instant. Sifo seized the moment. "Drive," the ranger shouted. Sifo slammed the gearshift, reversing hard. The truck lurched backward just as the elephant swept its trunk, knocking another poacher off his feet. The scar-faced leader cursed, raising his rifle. But before he could fire, the jungle erupted. More figures emerged from the trees, not men, but giants, elephants. The calf hadn't come alone. Its herd had followed. A massive bull elephant crashed through the undergrowth, tusks gleaming. Behind it, 3 more adults thundered onto the scene, their sheer presence shaking the ground. The poachers' confidence evaporated. "Run," one of them shouted. And they did. They didn't stand a chance. The elephants charged, their trumpets deafening. The poachers scattered, abandoning their weapons, vanishing into the jungle like frightened rats. Within seconds, they were gone. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the elephants. Sipho's grip on the wheel trembled. The young elephant turned to face him, eyes bright with determination. It had made its choice. It wasn't just following them anymore. It was protecting them. Sipho swallowed hard. "You saved us," he whispered. The calf let out a triumphant trumpet, then turned, waiting. No more obstacles, no more threats. Sipho hit the gas, the truck roaring forward. And this time, the young elephant ran beside them. They were going to make it. The truck sped down the dirt road, kicking up a trail of dust behind it. The young elephant ran alongside, its powerful legs keeping pace despite the truck's speed. Its breath came in short, determined bursts, but it never wavered. Sipho stole a glance at the ranger. "How's the leopard?" The ranger's face was grim as he checked the IV line. "Not good. We're losing her." Sipho tightened his grip on the wheel. "We'll make it." The radio crackled to life. "This is base station. Sipho, do you copy?" Sipho grabbed the radio. "We're en route with the injured leopard. But we ran into poachers. We need backup. Over." Static. Then a response. "We copy. We're sending a team to intercept you. But Sipho, the station is on high alert. The poachers may not be working alone. Over." Sipho's stomach clenched. This wasn't just a random ambush. The poachers had planned for this. The leopard wasn't just an injured animal, it was their stolen prize. And they weren't going to let it go easily. "Understood," he said. "We'll keep moving." The road ahead twisted sharply as they neared the river crossing. The old wooden bridge loomed in the distance, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. Sipho's mind raced. The bridge was sturdy, but not built for heavy loads. And with the elephant running alongside them, the structure might not hold. He hesitated. The calf trumpeted, as if sensing his worry. "You can't cross with us," Sipho called out. "You have to find another way." The calf slowed, its ears twitching. It let out a soft, uncertain rumble. The ranger leaned forward. "Maybe there's a shallow crossing downstream. It can meet us on the other side." Sipho nodded. "Go," he urged the elephant, pointing toward the trees. For a moment, the calf hesitated. Then, with one last look, it turned and disappeared into the jungle. Sipho exhaled and pressed forward. The bridge creaked under the weight of the truck as they rolled onto the wooden planks. Below, the river rushed past, fast and unforgiving. Halfway across, the radio crackled again. "Base to Sipho. You need to move faster. We just intercepted a transmission. Poachers are closing in on your location. They're coming from the east." Sipho's heart pounded. "They're trying to cut us off." The ranger muttered. "Then we need to move. Now." Sipho pressed the accelerator, urging the truck forward. They were almost across when the first gunshot rang out. A bullet struck the wooden railing, splintering it into shards. "Snipers," the ranger yelled. A second shot whizzed past, barely missing the side mirror. Sipho clenched his jaw and floored the gas. The truck lurched forward, just as a third shot hit one of the rear tires. The rubber exploded with a deafening bang. The truck skidded sideways, tires screeching against the wooden planks. "Hold on," Sipho shouted. The truck slammed onto the far side of the riverbank, metal groaning in protest. It fishtailed wildly before Sipho wrestled it back under control. Another shot rang out. Then, out of nowhere, a thunderous trumpet split the air. The jungle exploded into movement. The young elephant burst from the trees at full speed, dust and leaves swirling around it. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, two fully grown elephants charged forward. The poachers never saw it coming. The elephants stormed through the underbrush, their tusks gleaming in the dying sunlight. The ground trembled beneath their weight. The first poacher barely had time to react before a massive trunk slammed into him, sending him flying backward. The second tried to raise his rifle, only for the young calf to ram into his side, knocking him off his feet. Panic erupted. The remaining poachers bolted, vanishing into the trees, their ambush shattered. Sipho gripped the wheel, staring in stunned disbelief. The calf let out a triumphant trumpet before turning toward the truck, as if asking, "Did I do good?" Sipho laughed breathlessly. "You did amazing." The ranger exhaled, rubbing his face. I can't believe it just saved us." Again, Sifo turned back to the road. "Let's get moving before more show up." With the truck battered but still running, they pressed on. The rescue station was just ahead. And this time, nothing would stop them. The battered truck rattled along the dirt road, its damaged tire thudding unevenly against the ground. Inside, the ranger kept his hands pressed against the leopard's wounds, his face tight with concentration. The animal's breathing was shallow, its ribs barely rising and falling. Sifo gripped the wheel, his eyes scanning the horizon. They were close now, just a few more kilometers to the rescue station. But with the damage to the truck, every second felt like an eternity. Behind them, the jungle had fallen silent after the chaos of the ambush. The poachers had been driven off. But for how long? Sifo couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The young elephant had kept up with them for as long as it could. But the rough terrain had slowed it down. Now, it was nowhere in sight. Sifo exhaled, shaking his head. The calf had already done more than enough. It had found them. It had saved them. Now, he had to focus on saving the leopard. "Hang in there, girl," the ranger murmured, adjusting the IV line. "We're almost there." As if in response, the leopard let out a weak, shuddering breath. Sifo pushed the truck forward. The dirt road wound its way up a rocky incline, and with every bump, the truck groaned in protest. They weren't going to make it much farther in this condition. But then, just as they crested the hill, the rescue station came into view. A small collection of buildings stood in the clearing, their lights glowing in the twilight. Beyond them, the fenced-off rehabilitation center stretched toward the tree line. Even from a distance, Sifo could see the veterinarians already running toward the entrance, alerted by their radio calls. Relief surged through him. "We made it," he breathed. The truck skidded to a stop just outside the main building. The ranger flung the door open, waving at the approaching team. "We need a stretcher, now." The veterinary team was already in motion, rushing forward with equipment. Within seconds, the leopard was being carefully lifted from the truck onto a waiting gurney. The head veterinarian, a woman in her 50s with graying hair tied back in a ponytail, barked rapid instructions to her team. "Internal bleeding suspected. We need an ultrasound. Now, get her to the surgical room." They wheeled the leopard inside, disappearing into the sterile light of the clinic. Sifo slumped against the truck, his heart still racing. They had made it, but even as relief washed over him, a new thought crept in. Where was the elephant calf? He turned, scanning the tree line. No sign of it. Had it gotten lost? Had it turned back? He didn't know why, but something about that thought unsettled him. He had to find it. The night sky was an endless stretch of darkness, with only faint moonlight filtering through the dense canopy of trees. Sifo gripped the steering wheel tightly, guiding the jeep over the uneven dirt road. An uneasy feeling sat heavy in his chest. The young elephant was missing. After its daring attack on the poacher's vehicle, it was supposed to return to its herd. But despite retracing their path back to the danger zone, there was no sign of it. Beside him, the head ranger held his rifle firmly, his eyes scanning the surroundings with sharp focus. "We're almost there," the man murmured. "Stay alert, Sifo." Sifo nodded, his gaze locked on the path ahead. Then, the headlights caught something in the distance. A large, unmoving shape in the middle of the road. He slammed on the brakes. The jeep skidded to a stop, kicking up a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, Sifo's heart clenched. It was the young elephant, lying on its side, legs awkwardly splayed. A thick rope bound its front legs tightly together. And standing next to it, two men, their backs turned to the jeep. The poachers. But this time, they weren't fumbling or panicked. They were prepared. One held a tranquilizer rifle. The other was securing the rope to a nearby tree, ensuring the elephant couldn't escape even if it woke up. Sifo felt his fists clench. They had taken it down. Before he could react, the head ranger moved. He flung open the door and raised his rifle. "Drop your weapons, now." The two poachers jerked around in surprise. But they didn't look scared. They exchanged glances. Then, the one with the rifle acted fast. Without hesitation, he raised the tranquilizer gun. He fired. Sifo barely had time to duck as the dart whizzed past, embedding itself into the jeep's dashboard. A gunshot rang out. The head ranger had fired. A scream of pain followed. The poacher with the tranquilizer gun collapsed, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. The other one bolted, disappearing into the thick undergrowth. Sifo took a shaky breath, hands gripping the steering wheel. But there was no time to think. The elephant calf still lay motionless. The tranquilizer hadn't killed it, but it had put the animal into a deep sleep. Sifo knew it would eventually wear off, but they couldn't leave it there. If more poachers arrived, it would be defenseless. He leapt from the jeep and ran toward the calf. It let out a weak, barely audible groan. "Easy, little one," Sifo murmured, hastily cutting the ropes. The head ranger moved beside him, keeping his rifle aimed toward the forest, ready in case the other poacher returned. "The wounded one won't get far," he said, "but we can't stay here long. They might have backup." Sifo nodded, his focus on the elephant. It was still breathing steadily, but it wouldn't wake up for at least another hour. And that's when a deep, resonant sound rumbled through the trees. Not human footsteps, a roar. Sifo turned toward the sound. His eyes widened. Emerging from the shadows was a massive figure. An adult elephant. No, more than one. The entire herd. They had returned, and they had come looking for their lost one. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Sifo felt his pulse quicken as the herd emerged from the dense undergrowth. Their massive forms silhouetted against the moonlight. Their ears flared wide. Their trunks lifted to scent the air. The largest elephant, likely the matriarch, took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the fallen calf, then shifted toward Sifo and the ranger. For a split second, Sifo's instincts screamed at him to retreat. A protective elephant herd was not to be trifled with. If they perceived him as a threat, he would not have time to react before they charged. But he forced himself to stay still. The calf let out a soft, weak rumble in its drug-induced sleep. That was all it took. A loud trumpet blast erupted from the matriarch. She charged forward, her tusks gleaming in the faint light. "Back to the jeep, now," the ranger barked. Sifo spun around and scrambled toward the vehicle. The ground trembled beneath him as the elephants closed the distance. The ranger barely made it into the driver's seat before the matriarch reached them. She swung her trunk violently, striking the side of the jeep with a thunderous thud. The entire vehicle rocked. Sifo ducked, heart hammering. If she flipped the jeep, they were finished. But before she could strike again, a different sound cut through the chaos. A deep, distressed rumble. It was the calf, even in its drugged state. It sensed the tension. It stirred weakly, its small trunk twitching. The matriarch hesitated. She turned her attention back to the calf. Ears still flared, but her aggression faltered. Sifo took a slow breath. This was their only chance. "She's not sure if we're a threat," Sifo murmured. The ranger, still gripping his rifle, gave a terse nod. "Then we need to make sure she sees we're not." Sifo swallowed hard and, against every survival instinct in his body, stepped away from the jeep. The matriarch's gaze snapped back to him. He raised his hands slowly, showing he held no weapons. Then, carefully, he gestured toward the calf. "She's just sleeping," he said softly, knowing full well the words meant nothing to the elephant, but his body language might. The other elephants, now forming a semi-circle around the fallen calf, let out low, uneasy rumbles. Sifo took another step forward. The ranger tensed behind him. "You're either the bravest man I know," the older man muttered, "or the stupidest." Sifo ignored him. The matriarch's eyes flicked between him and the calf. Then, cautiously, she reached out her trunk and brushed the calf's side. It let out another faint rumble in response. Sifo exhaled slowly. The herd wasn't attacking, not yet, but there was still a problem. The tranquilizer was keeping the calf down, and there was no way to explain that to the elephants. If it didn't wake soon, they might assume it was dying. And if that happened, their patience might turn into rage. Sifo knew time was running out. The matriarch was still watching the calf closely. Her massive frame tensed with uncertainty. The rest of the herd rumbled in agitation, shifting their weight nervously. The calf stirred again, but its movements were sluggish. The tranquilizer was still in effect. If it didn't wake up fully, the herd might assume the worst and react violently. Sifo turned to the ranger. "How long until the tranquilizer wears off?" he whispered. The ranger grimaced. "Could be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the dose. And if it's a strong dose, it could take longer. Sipho's stomach sank. They didn't have that kind of time. The matriarch let out a low, warning growl. She was growing impatient. One wrong move, and they would be crushed. But then, an idea formed in Sipho's mind. It was risky. Possibly the riskiest thing he'd ever done, but it might just work. He needed to convince the herd that the calf was still alive and not in danger. And the best way to do that? Encourage the calf to move. Sipho took a deep breath. Then, before the ranger could stop him, he stepped forward again, this time, toward the calf. The herd reacted instantly. A few of the younger males stamped their feet aggressively. One even trumpeted, clearly warning him to back off. The ranger sucked in a sharp breath behind him. "Sipho, what are you?" But Sipho didn't hesitate. He crouched next to the calf, careful not to touch it. Instead, he picked up a handful of dry grass from the ground and gently brushed it over the calf's trunk. The ticklish sensation made the calf twitch. Sipho repeated the motion. Again, the calf reacted, this time with a weak snort. Its trunk wavered slightly. The matriarch's ears twitched. It was working. The calf's instincts were kicking in. Its sluggish movements became slightly more pronounced as it tried to shake off the irritant. Sipho resisted the urge to smile. If he could just keep this up. But then, disaster struck. One of the younger elephants, still wary of Sipho's presence, suddenly lost patience. It trumpeted loudly and lunged forward. It wasn't a full charge, but it was enough to send Sipho scrambling backward. The ranger cursed and raised his rifle. Though he didn't fire, a warning shot might scare the herd, but it could also push them into a full-blown attack. For a split second, Sipho thought he was done for. But just as the young bull was about to reach him, the matriarch stepped in. She let out a powerful, commanding trumpet, cutting through the night air like a thunderclap. The young bull froze immediately. The matriarch turned her gaze toward Sipho, then down at the calf. And then, slowly, deliberately, she used her trunk to mimic what Sipho had been doing. She nudged the calf's side gently, then ran the tip of her trunk along its face. The calf let out a groggy, half-conscious snort. Sipho held his breath. The entire herd fell silent, watching. Then, after an agonizing moment, the calf lifted its head slightly. It was still weak, still dazed from the tranquilizer, but it was enough. The matriarch rumbled in response, her entire posture shifting. The danger had passed. The herd wasn't attacking anymore. Sipho let out a long, shaky breath. The ranger exhaled too. I can't believe that actually worked. But Sipho barely heard him. Because at that moment, the matriarch did something unexpected. She turned toward him, eyes meeting his for a long, considering moment. Then, with slow and deliberate movements, she lifted her trunk and gently placed it on his shoulder. Not as a warning, but as a gesture of trust. Sipho stood frozen, his breath shallow as the matriarch's heavy trunk rested on his shoulder. It wasn't aggressive, nor was it forceful. It was simply a gesture, one that carried an unspoken meaning. The ranger beside him still held his rifle, his knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. "Sipho," he whispered, but Sipho barely heard him. His focus was locked on the matriarch's eyes, deep, ancient, filled with something he hadn't expected. Understanding. The matriarch seemed to recognize what he had done. He hadn't just tried to trick them. He had helped. And now, the herd was responding to that in a way that Sipho never thought possible. Slowly, the matriarch withdrew her trunk. She turned toward the still recovering calf and rumbled lowly. Another adult female moved in, running her trunk along the calf's back, offering reassurance. The calf stirred more now, lifting its head slightly higher, blinking sluggishly. The tranquilizer was wearing off, though not fully. The ranger finally lowered his rifle, exhaling a slow, measured breath. "I don't know what you just did," he murmured, "but that might have saved both of us." Sipho let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But the danger wasn't over yet. The poachers were still out there. He turned toward the trees, scanning the darkened landscape. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, the men who had shot the calf were likely watching, waiting. They wouldn't leave empty-handed. And that meant the herd was still in danger. Sipho clenched his fists, his mind racing. The poachers wouldn't leave without a fight. He turned to the ranger, lowering his voice. "We can't just wait. They know the calf is still alive. They'll come back." The ranger nodded grimly, adjusting his grip on his rifle. Agreed, and they'll come armed. Sifo glanced at the herd. The matriarch was still watching him. Her ears flared slightly, sensing the tension in the air. The other elephants stood protectively around the young one, forming a wall of muscle and tusks. But they wouldn't be able to stop a group of well-equipped poachers. We had to get them to move, Sifo muttered. The ranger frowned. Easier said than done. They won't leave their injured calf. A rustling in the trees made both men freeze. Something was moving in the undergrowth. Slowly, Sifo reached for the flare gun strapped to his belt. It was their last resort, a signal for backup. But the nearest anti-poaching unit was miles away. They were on their own. The noise grew louder. Footsteps. At least 3, maybe 4 people. Then, a single gunshot rang out. The elephants trumpeted in alarm, stamping their feet. The herd closed in tighter around the calf, their massive bodies shielding it. The matriarch let out a deafening roar, lifting her trunk high. Sifo grabbed the ranger's shoulder and pulled him down behind a fallen log as another shot whizzed past. "They're here," the ranger muttered. Sifo's pulse pounded in his ears. He had one chance. He lifted the flare gun and fired. A burst of red light shot into the night sky, illuminating the trees in an eerie glow. The poachers cursed. One of them shouted something in a language Sifo didn't recognize. Then came a sound that sent chills down his spine. A deep, powerful rumble, one that didn't come from the herd in front of them. It came from the jungle behind them, and it was getting closer. The rumbling grew louder, shaking the earth beneath them. The poachers hesitated. One of them cursed, frantically looking around. Another raised his rifle, eyes darting through the darkness. Then, out of the dense jungle, a massive shape emerged, a full-grown male elephant, larger than any in the herd. His ivory tusks gleamed under the red glow of the flare. His eyes filled with a fierce intelligence. Sifo's breath caught in his throat. It was him, the lone bull who had left the herd, the one who had guided Sifo here. The elephant let out a thunderous trumpet, his ears flaring wide. The sheer force of the sound made the poachers recoil. One of them fired a shot, but the bullet barely grazed the elephant's thick hide. Big mistake. With a sudden charge, the massive bull stormed forward, his enormous feet thundering against the earth. The ground trembled with each step. The poachers panicked. One dropped his rifle and bolted. Another tried to fire again, but his hands shook too much to aim. The elephant didn't stop. He barreled straight through their ranks, sending men scattering like leaves in a storm. One poacher was too slow. He barely turned before the bull's trunk lashed out, striking him hard in the chest and sending him crashing into a tree. A sharp whistle rang out from the darkness. The remaining poachers, realizing they were outmatched, turned and fled into the jungle. Silence fell over the clearing. The massive bull elephant stood in the center, his breath heavy, his gaze sweeping over the herd. Slowly, the matriarch stepped forward, extending her trunk to him. They touched briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Sifo exhaled, his heart still racing. The threat was gone, but the calf still lay wounded. And now, with the poachers scattered, there was only one thing left to do: get it to safety. The injured calf let out a weak cry, its small body shivering. Sifo knelt beside it, running a hand over its thick, mud-streaked skin. The tranquilizer was still affecting its system. But worse, the wound on its leg was deep. If they didn't act fast, infection could set in. He turned to the matriarch. "We need to move it." The old elephant huffed, her ears flaring slightly. The rest of the herd stood nearby, restless but waiting. The large bull who had scattered the poachers remained still, watching. How could they transport the calf? It couldn't walk on its own. The wound was bad, and its body was still sluggish from the drugs. Sifo glanced at the bull elephant. An idea sparked. Could it carry the calf? It was risky. The calf was fragile, and moving it roughly could cause more damage. But leaving it here, vulnerable to infection and predators, was worse. He stepped forward cautiously, raising a hand toward the bull. The massive creature regarded him with dark, intelligent eyes. "Help us," Sifo said softly. The elephant flapped its ears and let out a deep rumble. Stepping closer, the matriarch and the rest of the herd didn't object. Sifo knelt and carefully adjusted the calf's position. Then, moving slowly, He gestured toward the bull. The great elephant lowered its trunk, touching the calf gently, as if sensing its weakness. Then, with astonishing care, it wrapped its trunk around the young one's midsection. Lifting it slightly, the calf gave a small whimper but did not struggle. The bull carefully shifted its weight, lowering its tusks to support the calf's body. Saifo held his breath as the elephant gently hoisted the injured baby onto its back. It worked. The matriarch let out a deep, approving rumble. Now, they had to move. With Saifo leading the way, they set off toward the sanctuary, the herd surrounding them like a living shield. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time that night, hope burned bright. The journey to the sanctuary was slow and careful. The herd moved together, ensuring the bull elephant carrying the injured calf had enough space to walk without jostling it too much. Saifo led the way, keeping an eye on the darkness surrounding them. The poachers might still be out there. The sanctuary was several kilometers away, and the path was rough. Each step felt like a battle against time. The calf's breathing was still uneven, and Saifo knew it needed medical attention as soon as possible. Hours passed, the sky lightening slightly as dawn approached. Finally, they saw the fence of the wildlife reserve in the distance. Relief flooded Saifo's chest. As they neared the entrance, rangers emerged, armed and alert. They had received Saifo's radio message earlier, and now they stood ready. "It's a calf," Saifo called out. "Badly injured. We need the vet." The team rushed forward, stunned at the sight of the large bull elephant carrying the baby on its back. It was a scene unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Slowly, gently, the elephant knelt down. Saifo and the rangers carefully lifted the calf off its back and placed it on a large padded stretcher. The vet, already on standby, immediately began assessing the injury. The herd watched from a distance, their bodies tense. The matriarch let out a low rumble, her eyes fixed on the calf. "We'll do everything we can," Saifo promised, looking at the old elephant. The vet worked quickly, cleaning the wound and injecting antibiotics to prevent infection. The calf stirred weakly but was too exhausted to resist. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the vet looked up. "It's going to make it," she said. "The bullet missed the bone. If we had arrived any later, it would have been much worse." Saifo let out a long breath. They had done it. The herd remained near the fence for a while, as if waiting for confirmation. Then, slowly, the matriarch rumbled again, nudging the others. They had done their part. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the elephants turned and began their journey back to the wild. But Saifo knew they would remember. And so would he. Saifo felt a familiar excitement rise in his chest. He followed the ranger toward the open plains of the reserve. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. As they reached the viewing deck, Saifo saw them. The elephant herd. They stood in the distance, their massive forms silhouetted against the fading light. But it wasn't just any herd, it was the same group he had encountered months ago. The same elephants that had carried Luyanda to safety. And there, standing slightly ahead of the others, was the great bull elephant. The sight of him sent a wave of emotion through Saifo. He had doubted whether the elephant would return, whether it would even remember this place. But here he was. The rangers watched in awe as the bull elephant moved closer, its large ears fanning out as it let out a deep, resonant rumble. It was calling. And from behind the fence, Luyanda heard. The young leopard, now much stronger, lifted its head. It sniffed the air, ears twitching. Then, without hesitation, it stood up and walked toward the fence. For a long moment, predator and prey simply looked at each other. The bull elephant extended its trunk slightly, another low rumble escaping its throat. Luyanda, in turn, lowered its head slightly, not in submission, but in recognition. They remembered each other, and somehow, in a way that no human could fully understand, they acknowledged what they had shared. The following morning, the rangers and Saifo gathered at the edge of the reserve. It was time for Luyanda to return to the wild. The young leopard had fully recovered, its muscles lean and powerful, its golden coat gleaming in the morning sun. The sanctuary staff had spent weeks preparing for this moment, ensuring the leopard could hunt, climb, and survive on its own. As the metal gate of the enclosure slowly creaked open, Luyanda hesitated only for a second before stepping forward. There was no fear in its eyes now, only confidence. Only the call of the wild. The elephant herd stood not far away, their massive bodies forming a silent audience to this final moment. The great bull elephant remained still, watching. Luyanda took one last look at Saifo, the man who had helped save its life. Then, without another pause, the young leopard bolted into the open plains, disappearing into the tall grass, where it belonged. Saifo exhaled, feeling both pride and sadness. The cycle of life continued. The young leopard had returned to nature, where it was meant to be. The great elephant let out one last deep rumble before turning away, leading its herd back into the vast wilderness. As Saifo watched them fade into the distance, he realized something profound. Nature was a delicate balance, fierce yet fragile, ruthless yet filled with unexpected moments of kindness. A predator had been saved by a creature it should have feared. A human had witnessed a bond beyond explanation. The wild had taught them all something valuable. Survival was not just about strength. It was about understanding, about respect, about knowing when to fight, when to flee, and when to stand together. Saifo turned back toward the sanctuary, a quiet smile on his face. He would always remember this story, not just as a tale of rescue, but as a lesson about the world, about nature, and about the unseen connections between all living things. Somewhere, deep in the wild, Luyanda ran free, and the elephants continued their journey. Life moved forward, and that was how it was always meant to be. Thank you for joining this incredible journey. Dear friends, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to follow this story from beginning to end. It has been a journey of courage, survival, and the unbreakable bonds that can form between creatures, even those of different species. The tale of the elephant, the cheetah, and the humans who played their part is a reminder that in the vast and unpredictable world of nature, kindness and understanding can bridge the gap between survival and despair. Through this story, we have witnessed the power of perseverance. The wounded cheetah, despite its pain, never gave up. The elephant, guided by its deep instincts and intelligence, refused to abandon a friend in need. And the compassionate humans, who could have ignored the call for help, instead chose to step in and make a difference. This teaches us an invaluable lesson. No matter how different we may seem from one another, compassion is universal. Nature thrives on balance, and every creature, big or small, has a role to play. The elephant and the cheetah may be vastly different in size, strength, and way of life, yet in this moment, they were connected by something far greater: empathy. It is a quality that we, as humans, should strive to embrace in our own lives. In a world that can often feel divided, small acts of kindness, whether to a fellow human or to the creatures we share this planet with, can create ripples of positive change. This story also highlights the importance of conservation and protecting wildlife. Many species today face dangers not just from natural challenges, but from human threats such as poaching, habitat destruction, and climate change. The dedication of wildlife rangers and conservationists ensures that these magnificent creatures continue to thrive for future generations. Perhaps this story has inspired you to learn more about how you can contribute to protecting nature, even in small ways. So, as we close this chapter, I hope this tale leaves you with something to reflect on. Strength is not always about power, but about resilience. Friendship is not limited by differences, but strengthened by understanding. And sometimes, the most unexpected friendships can teach us the most valuable lessons. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss more heartwarming and adventurous tales in the future. Your support means the world, and it encourages me to continue bringing stories that inspire and entertain. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and see you in the next adventure.